Could you live locked up in a building with more than 40 floors, no balcony, dark corridors, hundreds of cameras, and thousands of neighbors you've never seen? What if I told you that this isn't science fiction, it's reality? A suffocating, silent reality full of rules, in the middle of Russia, which has even been nicknamed a human anthill, not only because of its size, but because of the way people live inside, cramped, stacked, watched. But why was this building constructed like this? Who chooses to live in a place like this? And most importantly, what does it reveal about Russian society that almost no one dares to show? Today, Bello Mundo will take you to Novy Okkervil, Russia's largest residential complex, where privacy is a luxury, loneliness is collective, and fear lives next door. Before Russia became synonymous with giant apartment blocks, the country was already a walking contrast. On one side, families huddled in rural huts, often without electricity, isolated in the cold of the countryside. On the other, rapidly growing urban centers, but without the infrastructure to withstand the population pressure that lay ahead. It was against this backdrop of inequality that, in 1917, with the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik government proposed a simple and radical solution. The state would own the land and also be responsible for putting a roof over everyone's head. In theory, it seemed fair. In practice, it was the beginning of an unprecedented urban experiment. No luxury, no individualism. The home was now a cell of the collective. The first ideas were still in their infancy. Basic buildings, all identical, with minimal space and a functional structure. The priority was simple: cram as many people as possible into structures that could be built quickly and cheaply. Everything was designed according to the logic of the more, the better. But it was with Stalin that things really took shape. During the 30s and 40s, the country underwent a massive internal migration. Millions of peasants were forced to leave the countryside to work in cities that didn't even have enough paved roads, let alone housing. The government's response was straightforward: stack them up. The first kommunalki, Soviet collective apartments, began to spring up everywhere. One bathroom per floor, shared kitchen, common room. Privacy? None. It was a way of life based on scarcity. But for a country at war with shortages of everything, it was all they could do. And so was born the pattern that would shape the Russian landscape for almost a century, block upon block, as far as the eye could see. And the craziest thing, this idea was never completely abandoned. After this phase came World War II, and with it, chaos. Cities were destroyed, millions were killed, factories were in ruins. There was dust, trauma, and a sea of homeless people. The Soviet Union was bleeding, and the question remained: where to put everyone? That's when Nikita Khrushchev took charge and promised the impossible: housing for everyone. But how to do that in a country with no money, no time, no infrastructure? Simple: precast, concrete, total standardization. The answer was brutally efficient: standardize everything. No frills, no details, no wasting time. Buildings made like shoeboxes. The Khrushchevkas were born. 5-story blocks, stacked with precast concrete, no elevators, and space only for the basics. Tiny kitchens, cramped bathrooms, 2 bedrooms, and a hallway. It was either that or living on the street. These buildings began to sprout up everywhere, always with the same promise: central heating, piped gas, a school around the corner, and a grocery store nearby. Everything was designed to keep citizens within their own microcosm, far from capitalist shop windows and close to state control. But there was more behind it, keeping everyone together, watched, close to work, close to the party. From the outside, it looked like efficiency. From the inside, it was control. During the 60s and 70s, the Soviet Union became a giant monochrome construction site. From Moscow to Vladivostok, New arrivals felt like they hadn't left the same place. Everything was identical. But even with people piling in at full speed, the problem remained. The more people arrived from the countryside, the more children were born. The more blocks needed to be built. And so the concept of the city condominium gained momentum. It was no longer just about putting a roof over your head. It was about building your entire life there, from daycare to the grave. Everything was designed to run on autopilot, all in the name of the collective. With the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 90s, the system collapsed. But the blocks, my friends, those remained standing. The country opened its doors to the market economy. Communist ideology lost ground. Privatization arrived with a vengeance. But the custom of stacking people in gigantic blocks remained strong. Only now the motive was no longer ideological. It was economic. Suddenly, the state housing model disappeared. The state, which had previously decided where you lived, now said, "This apartment is yours. You can sell it, renovate it, rent it out." It was the largest real estate privatization process in modern history. Millions of families received the property they lived in for free, usually a Khrushchevka or Brezhnevka inherited from previous times. But at the same time, the country was plunging into a brutal crisis. Rampant inflation, unemployment, violence, collapse of public services. But then came the hard part. Now it was every man for himself. No public maintenance, no money for renovations, no organization. The buildings began to rot from the outside and inside. There was mold, burst pipes, broken elevators, and no one knew who was to blame. For decades, the housing belonged to the people. Suddenly, it belonged to someone. But who? The state no longer provided maintenance, and the residents had no money or organization to take care of buildings that, until recently, belonged to everyone. Meanwhile, a powerful new figure emerged, the private developer. That's right. With the rise of oligarchs and politicians turned overnight entrepreneurs, the real estate sector became a money-making machine. In the new capitalist Russia, local governments and construction companies realized that they could profit, and profit greatly, from the Soviet logic of densification. Pile people in, spend little, sell fast. The real estate sector, once banned, became one of the main engines of the new Russian capitalism. Companies sprang up out of nowhere, financed by oligarchs and politicians, and began to erect towers, shopping malls, gated communities, all under the logic of profit, no longer social need. And that's when history turned upside down. Remember those Soviet ideas of standardization to serve the masses? Now, the goal was different. Concentrate to make a profit. Packing people in was no longer synonymous with providing shelter, but rather with extracting the maximum per square meter. And the construction companies, which were never stupid, discovered the gold mine. Take peripheral neighborhoods with easy access to the city, buy land at low prices, promise first-world infrastructure, and fill them with towering blocks stuck together. But unlike the Soviet plans, there was no committee, no micro-district, no urban planning. Often, the towers appeared before any schools, hospitals, or subway stations. That's how Kudrovo was born, the Russian human anthill. The district, which until the early 2000s was basically a rural village, was a town with less than 200 inhabitants. Simple houses, dirt roads, fields all around. But it was right next to the St. Petersburg Ring Road, and that was enough. But then IKEA arrived, the famous Swedish furniture and decoration chain known for selling affordable, modern, ready-to-assemble products. When IKEA decided to open a shopping mall in the area, the message was clear. There was consumer potential there. There was room to grow, and it grew. The developers came, the cranes came, the investors came, And of course, the residents came, thousands of them, attracted by seductive advertisements, attractive prices, and the promise that a new way of life was being born there. Modern, practical, affordable, an entire city wrapped in concrete. It was in 2015 that the peak of this transformation took shape. Novy Okkervil emerged, the colossus that would make any Khrushchevka look like a dollhouse. 35 entrances, 3,708 apartments, more than 18,000 residents squeezed into the same address. It's not a figure of speech. It's literally a vertical city, a human colony stacked like an anthill. And it's no wonder it earned this nickname, the human anthill. In fact, it is the king of all ant colonies. But unlike in Soviet times, there is no longer a state taking care of anything. It is not a government building, nor is it public housing. It is a private condominium with an elected superintendent, maintenance fees, and its own rules. Like any building in the capitalist world, only on a monstrous scale. The idea is self-sufficiency. You live there and have everything there. There's a supermarket, there's a bakery, there's a pharmacy, a beauty salon, a gym, a daycare center, a coffee shop. There's even a post office on the ground floor. It sounds like a dream, doesn't it? But that's where the nightmare begins. Complaints soon began to pop up. Some people go months without leaving the building. Literally, queues for everything became routine. Sunlight barely enters most of the apartments, and when you try to leave by car, it's chaos. With only 3 main exits, traffic grinds to a halt. Traffic jams every day, all the time. Parking? There are no spaces. Schools? Overcrowded. Decent public spaces? Almost none. What was sold as the perfect solution, living with everything nearby, turned out to be a huge mistake. Does it work? It kind of works. But at what cost? You live crammed in, surrounded by thousands of neighbors you don't even know. There's a constant feeling of confinement, of living in a place where everything is close, but everything is too much. On paper, the idea seems good. Put a lot of people in a small space with everything nearby. A market on the ground floor, a school next door, a pharmacy a few steps away. Everything is easy. Everything is efficient. But in practice, there's more to it than that. Those who live in these human anthills often repeat 2 words: convenience and claustrophobia. Yes, it's practical to do almost everything without leaving the block. But living in such a dense environment comes at a price, and a high one. The common areas are always crowded, the elevators are slow, and the traffic in the surrounding area is crazy. Parking, then, is a daily nightmare. There are buildings where residents take half an hour just to find a parking space nearby, and since many of these buildings are built in a hurry, focused on profit rather than quality, the result is often problematic. Shoddy workmanship, thin walls, noisy plumbing. In some cases, cracks appear within a few years of delivery. But what weighs most heavily is not always visible. It's the psychological impact. Living surrounded by thousands of neighbors with no space, no silence, no privacy. It messes with your head. Anxiety, stress, even depression. Life in high density takes its mental toll. And on Russian social media, this has even become content. On TikTok and Telegram, videos showing daily life in these blocks are popping up. Endless corridors, crowded elevators, condominium fights, lack of sunlight, and the nicknames say it all: human cage, prison building, vertical beehive. Even so, the towers continue to rise. In Khrushchev alone, there are already more than 50,000 residents, the equivalent of the population of San Rafael, California. Spain. In Khrushchev alone, there are already more than 50,000 residents, the equivalent of the population of cities such as Benidorm, Spain. The difference? There, people are spread out. Here, they are stacked on top of each other. And then come the questions that won't go away. If so many people complain, why do they continue to build these blocks? If it's so problematic, why does this model continue to grow? The answer is not simple, but it involves a little word that has decided the future of many cities around the world: profit. In practice, these mega blocks are a highly profitable business. Just think about it. Instead of occupying an entire neighborhood with scattered houses, investors build a single tower and fit thousands of apartments into it. The cost per resident plummets, the financial return skyrockets, and local governments often pretend they haven't seen a thing. In addition, there is one factor that cannot be ignored. Urbanization in Russia continues at full speed. This is especially true in regions such as St. Petersburg, where thousands of people move every year, leaving the countryside in search of work, schools, and hospitals. And these people need housing. Add to this a salary that does not keep pace with the cost of living in large cities. So, what is the most affordable alternative? Small, cramped apartments in a giant block that promises to solve everything in a single zip code. It's the famous, pile everyone in the same place and hope it works. Construction companies sell this model as if it were an urban revolution. They call it modern, efficient, sustainable. And for many people, it is, especially for those who came from more precarious conditions. But deep down, what you see is a system where individuals have to adapt to the project, not the other way around. And behind these buildings, there's a lot going on. Political support, tax exemptions, developer lobbying. It's not just necessity, it's interest, and big interest. Urban planners and architects have been warning for years. This aggressive verticalization creates cities without identity. Cities where residents don't feel like they belong. They become just another number in the sales figures. It's what many call soulless urbanism. On the outside, it may look new, modern, stylish, but on the inside, the same invisible cracks as always. And then the inevitable question arises: how long will this work? Because today there is no longer a party, no ideology, no 5-year plan. Now the market rules. If people are buying, towers are going up. More blocks, more people, less space. Does this model have limits? Or are we creating places so compact that they can no longer be called cities? What Kudrovo shows the world is not just a Russian reality. It is a mirror of something much bigger. A model of urbanization that is spreading too fast and being questioned too little. Because it's not just happening there. In Moscow, St. Petersburg, Yekaterinburg, and even outside Russia. Human anthills are being built in China, the United Arab Emirates, India, and even Latin America. The logic is always the same. Densify to the extreme. Sell the idea that you can have everything within reach, within a single block. But hide the real cost of it. Because, in the end, living in a building with 18,000 people, what is that? A modern solution or urban despair? Is it the city of the future, or the future without cities? Did you know this story? Had you heard about the human anthill in Russia? And more, would you live in a place like that? Comment here and tell us what you think about this crazy reality, and take the opportunity to enjoy the video, subscribe to Bello Mundo, and activate the bell, because there are many more absurd stories like this one coming up. Thank you very much for joining us. See you next time.